So if you've been with us over the course of the last few months, we have been diving into the book of John together every week, unpacking a new chapter and looking into the life of Jesus. It was this amazing series called 33 AD, and last week we wrapped up that series, and today we begin a new conversation. Today we begin a conversation that I feel like so many of us have the reality that we wrestle with every day of our life. This moment that we're going to dive into in the book of Judges, where it's a human moment where we get to see both the highs and the lows of what it means for us to be people of God, for us to be the ones that He has created in His image and in His likeness. And we're going to talk about fear, which may be one of the most natural human characteristics that we all know. And I'm one with fear. How about you? I feel like I've known fear for as long as I've known how to talk, for as long as I've lived this life. And it seems that every season I step into, every moment, every shift, that fear is like that unwanted guest that shows up without invitation. And the scriptures talk about fear over and over and over again because I think God knew that it would be a story that we would wrestle with through the end of time. And in Judges chapter 6, it begins in verse 1 with these words: "The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years He gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds." See, what I want to talk about for a few moments today is the reality that it's time for some of us to get out of the caves. The reality in life is there's going to be moments when we are going to want safety and security. There's going to be times when the challenges are going to feel overwhelming. There's going to be moments when we think it's too big for me. And the shift that needs to happen is that instead of running to the cave, we need to run to the presence of God. And I think far too often we have jeopardized our future because we chose the security of the cave instead of the uncertainty of the road. And this moment in Judges begins with this reality that all of us can understand, is that sometimes it's just easier to hide in the cave. Last week we went to Disneyland with the kids, and Disneyland is called the most magical place on earth, or the happiest place on earth, but it's also the most chaotic place on earth. And especially when you have 4 kids, and we went, and we're like, are we doing this? And we said, we're doing it, and we spent like 7 mortgages to get there. But it's all for the kids and the ones you love, and so we go, and it's so incredible just being at Disneyland in general, but especially through the eyes of a child. And it was just magical to see all the kids loving the rides and the characters and the experience. But I was speaking last Sunday, and so we went on Saturday, and we said, we're going to leave early. We're going to go early and leave early. It's going to be a big day, so we had a plan. So we left at 8 a.m., we got there at 8:30, and then we left to drive home at 11 p.m. Complete fail. It's like, how are we still here? And it was amazing to watch through the kids' eyes, but at the same time, it was also chaotic and stressful, and because we have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, right? And I know they're like, good Lord, are you okay? Pray for us, right? And it was amazing, but as an 8-year-old, right, they can't fully understand. You would think just going to Disneyland is enough, and they would say, thank you, Mom and Dad, you're the best. We know all that. We know we're eating rice and beans for the rest of the year, but thank you. But no, like our oldest is complaining because he wanted to go to Universal Studios. And then our 3-year-old is mad because he can't go on the rides that the 6-year-old and the 8-year-old are going on. And our baby girl, we have 3 boys and 1 girl who's a year. She did nothing wrong because she's perfect. Right? But it was this maddening day, and it was about 8 p.m. and it was like, okay, we should leave now. Now is the time. But then I two oldest were like, we want to go on Space Mountain. And they've never been on a roller coaster before. So this is like a milestone moment, and we can't say no to this. And so we look, and it says it's an hour wait. And it's like, all right, let's just do it. So I go in line with them, and I'm at this moment with my boys. But the hour wait turns into a 2-hour wait. And we're just like, oh my God, Jesus, are you here? And they're so close to just jumping out of line and trying to make some excuse why they couldn't ride it, but I could see the joy in their eyes, and they really wanted to ride it, and finally we go on the ride. And our son Indigo is like, he's fearless, right? And he's been dying to go on a roller coaster, and he's 6. And we go, and we get on the seat, and then tick, 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 tick. All of a sudden, he just grabs my arm, and he's squeezing it tight. And I'm like, are you good, buddy? Are you okay? You afraid? And he's like, no, Dad, no. And we tick, 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 tick. We're going up, and I hadn't been on Space Mountain in so long that every other ride, there was like 3-seaters, but Space Mountain's a 2-seater. So poor Zai, my 8-year-old, is in the back by himself. And we're going up, and I turn around, and I'm like, hey, how you doing, buddy? And his eyes are closed. I'm good, Dad. And we just go, and then ride takes off, and every turn, Indy's grabbing me tighter, and we're just having the time of our life, and I'm screaming, yeah! And then I hear Indy go, I want to scream, but I can't. And I wish I had the picture, but the picture they take on the ride, it's just Indy eyes closed, hugging me, and then Zai eyes closed like he fainted. And we get off the ride, and then as soon as we get off the ride, they cannot wait to go and tell Mommy how amazing it was. And I just see the light in their eyes, right? So I wonder how many times in our lives we miss out on the moments that bring us joy because we saw the fear, we didn't see the overcoming. So I wonder how many moments in your life that God has been waiting on the other side of your fears, and you're like, God, why aren't you here? And he's like, you're not going to see me until you have the courage to overcome. And here in the life of Gideon, this is one of the more transcendent moments in the scriptures. So I'm going to tell you how the story ends. And maybe you've already read it and you know, but it's this 300 Gerard Butler, Gladiator, Russell Crowe moment where Gideon is leading this army and there's 32,000 men and God says you have too many. So tell anyone who's afraid, who's trembling with fear to go back. It's okay. And 22,000 people leave. And now he's left with 10,000. And God says you still have too many men because you're going to win this victory. You're going to defeat the Midianites and you're going to finally have the freedom that you long for, and you're going to think that you did it rather than me. So you need to dwindle it down even more. So they go from 10,000 to 300. And then they have this incredible victory, 300 men, that this moment would be a legend that would live on for generations to come. See, you can go and read that on your own. It's incredible. But see, I know that there's a moment like that in your future. See, I know that you have a 300 moment in your future. But the question is, will you be willing to do the work necessary in all the moments beforehand to be ready for the moment God calls you to? See, it's all the pre-work that will determine who you become when the moment needs you the most. And we pick up after they're hiding in caves and clefts and strongholds. Verse 3 says, whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or the camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. And when the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you, and I gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the God of the Amorites, in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me. This is just a free little nugget I'm going to give you. All right, I think a lot of times in life, we look at our lives and we don't like what we have. We don't like what God's given us. We don't like the season we're in. And a lot of times we're like Gideon, and we're going, God, this is on you. We cried out to you, and you didn't show up. You allowed this thing to happen to me. You allowed this trial, this pain, this struggle. And we look at God and say, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? And then God tells us, you have not listened to me. See, it's one thing to ask God to help. It's another thing to listen to what he says. And you have to ask yourself, am I just crying out to God to rescue me, or am I listening to the ways in which he's asking me to invite him in? Am I hearing the potential of what he's calling me to? It's not enough to just cry out if you don't have the ears to hear what he's saying. And then, verse 11, it says, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah, that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. And when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And then these next 4 verses are really what I want us to focus on. In verse 13, it says, pardon me, my Lord. Gideon replied, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Pardon me, my Lord. Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. And then the Lord answered, I will be with you. I love this moment in the life of Gideon. There is so much gold and so much weight to the tension that we find in the conversation that Gideon has with God, where he's looking at all the evidence of the absence of God. He's looking at all of the troubles and all the struggles and all the heartache, and he's trying to find the fingerprints of God, and he can't seem to find it because he only sees it in the past. He says, I hear all these stories about how you rescued my ancestors, and all these stories how you brought us out of Egypt, but what's the good of a story of freedom in the past if you don't feel it in the present? What good is it to look back at what God did if you can't see what God's doing now? But I think this is the issue that so many of us have when we interact with God, is that we keep looking for him in our past. But you're never going to find Jesus in your past. You're only going to find a remnant of him. See, you may have a moment with God in your past. You may have a story of redemption from God in your past, but that is only a reminder of what God did. It's not the reality of his presence right now. And what he wants from all of us is to let the past ignite us forward so that we can meet him in our present and we can find him in our future. But you have to have the courage to get out of the cave. Because I know this room is filled with people like me. Cowards. That's right, I called you a coward. I called me one too, don't worry. We just got to admit it. Hi, my name is Joe, I'm a coward. Because the moment you declare it, it takes the power from it. And before Gideon has this transcendent moment that's waiting for him in the future, he has to deal with the reality that he had become a cave dweller. That all of Israel, all of God's people, all the chosen ones had chose safety and security, had chose to exist rather than to live. And I wonder how many of us find ourselves in the same place, simply asking God to protect us when he's trying to unleash us. See, if you're going to step into the life that God called you to, then there's 3 different caves that you have to step out of. And the first one is the cave of your past. If you're not yet in the place where you're moving forward, if you're not yet in the place where you're identifying God in your present and then you're pursuing him in your future, you're never going to fully live out the life you're created to live because you're living out the life you already lived. You got to step out of the cave of your past and go, why am I here? And this passage helps remind us why we choose different caves of our past. See, in verse 13, Gideon has this moment where he says, "Pardon me, my Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?" Have you ever been in that place in your journey with God where you're just questioning everything, or you're looking at it going, I thought I follow you, I thought I choose you, I thought I go to church and I open my Bible and I pray and I do all these things and I align my life with you, and I thought that was supposed to mean that everything is Gucci. But it's not. It's like everything is Skechers. If you work at Skechers, my bad. No shade, right? Hey, a job is a job, a business is a business, but I think so many of us have been told that lie, that you trust God with everything and the challenges are removed. But here's the problem. That's not life. See, if you want to be absent of challenges, then you're going to be absent of life. And I think so many of us are like getting in this place like, what? God, what has happened? Why would you allow this into my life? I love you, I'm pursuing you, or even I'm just open to you. And yet it seems like the same breath and I open my life to you, it's like you allow things into my life that I would have never chosen. Why has all this happened to us? A couple weeks ago, we went to New York. It was my wife's 40th birthday. Oh, shoot, my bad. Wife's birthday. And we're going to edit this out the podcast. She looks 21 still. Come on, boo. Still got it, girl. But we went to her birthday for an undisclosed number. And in New York, we were having the time of our life. And we got to hang with a friend of ours that was just also happened to be in New York then. And we go see a movie late night one time. And we wanted to be New Yorkers. So we're like taking the subway everywhere and living it up. And our friends like took an Uber back to their hotel. And they're like, "You want to take an Uber?" I was like, "Nah. Take the subway. I'm a New Yorker." And they're like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, we'll be totally fine." And then what had happened was we go on the train, and immediately the first 10 seconds on this ride, all of a sudden I feel like something like hit my leg. And I thought it was like maybe a little kid that was like walking by, and I look around and there's no kid. And I'm holding the bar and I look and there's a guy sitting there. I was like, did this dude just kick me? So I just turned and I said, "Yo, like, what happened?" And he immediately goes, "What happened? What happened?" And he said a bunch of words I can't repeat here at church. And he just keeps going, "What happened? I'm going to show you what happened." And fellas, I feel like you can relate. You ever been like, with your girl, with your friend, and you got to act like you're tougher than you are? But they know that you ain't that tough, but you still got to play the game. And so when he's like, "What happened?" And he's like, "I'm going to show you what happened." I was like, "Oh, we going to do this?" And he goes, "Look at you, look at me, my dog." He didn't say my dog, but you feel me, right? "Look at you, look at me." And then I did. I looked at him and I looked at me, and I know by my physique right now, you're like, "Yo, he probably works out a lot." I can see it in your eyes. You're like, yeah, you go to the gym a lot. You're probably fine. But I looked at him, and he definitely went to the gym more than I did. And I started getting a little nervous. And my wife, The moment he's like just screaming, the whole train is like, oh, it's about to go down. My wife is from New Zealand. She ain't like used to this. He's like, what happened? She's like, I'm out. She sat down the other end of the train. I was like, dang, babe, you don't want to ride with me like that? And I just stood there and I held it, and this other guy in the train looks at me. He goes, man, that dude's so high. You're going to be all right. I was like, okay, that's good. Thank you. Is that Jesus? Was that you? Okay, I'm right here. So then I just held it right there and just looking at him, and he just keeps berating me and like, let's go, next stop, let's go. And it was like 10 stops later. I was like, dang, Jesus, you couldn't make this quicker. But I think a lot of us interact with God in the same way, where we go, God, what happened? God, I thought you loved me. I thought you were for me. I thought that you were going to open up new pathways and new opportunities, and it seems like you've abandoned me in the very moments that I needed you the most. See, but maybe the question isn't, God, why have you abandoned me? But maybe the question to ourselves is, God, how do I need to see you in the midst of it? Because it's so easy to see God in your highs, but are you willing to actually look for God in your lows? Are you willing to have the maturity where you tell your spirit, I don't need God to bless me in order for me to see the blessings that he's already given me? See, when Gideon has this human moment, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? He reminds us all that there's going to be moments in our life when we're going to feel so abandoned by God. We're going to feel so ignored. We're going to feel like in the moments we needed him the most, he allowed the biggest challenges in our life. But here's what I want to propose to you today. Maybe God allowed the challenge into your life not so that your life could be easier, but so that you could be stronger. See, maybe God allowed it because he's trying to shift something inside of you where you move from existing to finally living. So you have to step out of the cave of your fears, but then you also have to step out of the cave of your past, but you also have to step out of the cave of your fears. See, in verse 14, I love this moment where Gideon is being reminded that there's challenges, where Gideon's been reminded of what God did in the past, but he's desperate for what God is going to do in the future. And then it says, the Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hands. Am I not sending you? See, when you are in this place where you're interacting with God, when you're trying to align yourself with him, ask yourself, am I only asking God to give me new resources? Am I only asking God to give me new insight, new revelation? Or am I asking God for the stewardship to put into the world what he's already put inside of me? So when he says, go in the strength you have, I think it's God just reminding us, stop asking for more and be faithful with what I've already given you. Because if we're going to clap, let's clap, right? Either all or none. Because when we find ourselves in this place in our spiritual life where we're always asking God for more, we're like a 6-year-old at Disneyland. He's saying, do you know what I've already poured into you? Do you know the investment that I've already spoken into your life? And we're like, yeah, God, but I want more. And he's like, I thought I already gave you a lot. You're like, yeah, God, but I want more. And our soul becomes sick and greedy. And it's this bottomless pit where it's never enough. And it's not that God doesn't want to be generous, because if you will open up your life to God, I'm telling you, he will pour more blessings into your life than you could imagine. But the key to unlocking your future is a life that's filled with gratitude. Because then God can trust you with more. But the more isn't simply so that your life is better. See, he says, go in the strength you have because there's a battle that's waiting for you that the resources will not be unleashed until you have the courage to step into the fight. See, what characteristics, what beauty, what life has God already poured inside of you that you've allowed to lay dormant because you're simply waiting for him to give you the next thing? But what the maturity that can happen in your spiritual life, where when all the doubts aren't erased and all the uncertainty isn't gone, because true faith is never measured in the certainty, it's measured in the uncertainty. Or you're like Gideon, and you just are filled with fear. And God, where are you? God, why have you abandoned me? God, will you give me the next thing? Years ago, I got a phone call from Pastor Irwin, and he said, hey, I was just invited to speak to the Green Bay Packers, and I want to bring you with me. Are you down? And I'm a big sports fan, so I said, of course. So I go, and I buy the first flight that I can. It's a 6 a.m. flight. I hop on it. I fly out to the Midwest, and then I land to a text from the Packers, and it says, hey, when you get a chance, can you send me your bio? And I'm like, who doesn't like to write up a bio and make yourself sound awesome, more awesome than you are? So I just start typing things, and I send it. He's like, thanks. Okay, when you get a chance, can you send me your verses? And I'm like, I'm just there with Pastor Irwin. I'm there to hang with him. I don't have any verses. He's going to have verses, so I tell him, hey, I got no verses, but can't wait to hang. And then he texts me back, oh, you didn't hear? And that's when I started getting a little nervous. I said, I didn't hear what? What did I not hear? Tell me what I didn't hear. And he said, Pastor Irwin didn't make it. His flight was canceled. And every flight from LA to Chicago to Milwaukee to anywhere in the Midwest was grounded because of this polar vortex. And you got on the last flight out of LA. And so he called us and he told us he couldn't make it. And he said, don't worry, my friend's there and he's got it. I didn't have it. I did not have it, and I start really getting nervous, and and some of you know this, some of you may not. Like, I'm terrified of public speaking. I had a speech impediment all the way from a kid through college, and I never wanted to be a speaker, a pastor, or anyone who talks in front of people. And up until that point, I had spoken a few times at Mosaic, and that was it. And all of a sudden, I hear, no, you're speaking to the team, and I was just overwhelmed with fear. And all the voices in my head reminding me of who I truly was, that I was a con. I'm not that guy. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to humiliate myself. And then it's in this environment where you're speaking to the Green Bay Packers. Like, these dudes look like they ate 7 guys like me. And I'm so intimidated. And I'm in the car, and I call Pastor Irwin, and he's like, yep, you got it. And you're up, and this is your time and your moment, and lean in. And I had this drive. I had rented a car, and I was this close to just being fully transparent to lying. I was going to lie and be like, hey, I missed my flight too. Or be like, hey, I lost my voice, so weird. I desperately wanted to lie and get out of it. And it was about to be one of the worst moments of my life when I was going to blatantly lie simply out of fear. And in the same moment when I was about to just tap out, choose the coward's way, I had this moment where I looked back, and God reminded me of years earlier when I spoke for one of the first times ever at a place like this, and I was so terrified, and I didn't understand it because I didn't want to do it, but I felt like God called me to it. And I was so overwhelmed with fear. I was hyperventilating in a paper bag. And I had this moment with God where he told me, if you'll just have the courage to move in spite of the fear, if you'll just have the courage to do what I've called you to do, I promise I will meet you every single time. It seemed as if he planted that seed years earlier, knowing that it's the moments like that when we can look back, not so that we see the evidence of him, but so that we can realize that we have what it takes to meet him in our future. And I took a deep breath and I drove, and I don't have time to tell you all the craziness of that trip and what happened, and I can't tell you how much I killed that talk. I don't have time for that. But what I can tell you is that it was a marker in my life where I stepped out of the cave of fear, where I stopped playing it safe. I stopped choosing the shelter. See, we're not supposed to find shelter out there. We're supposed to realize that God is our shelter. And he said, I'll meet you on the road of adventure. And I'll meet you in the midst of your fears. I'll meet you in the midst of your insecurities. Because the next conversation that Gideon has is so essential. Where Gideon tells the angel of the Lord, pardon me, my Lord, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. See, I don't have to know you to know that there have been voices in your life that have stolen far too much time in your head. See, I don't have to know you to know that you've allowed voices that have told you that you're less than. You've had voices that have shaped you. Maybe voices of people that you love that should have protected you, but they betrayed you. See, I don't have to know you to know that there have been outside voices that have tried to remind you of who you were in your past, that have had moments where they've stolen your future by telling you a lie, not about who you are, but about who you thought you were. So you may be here and you may feel like Gideon, that your clan is the weakest and you are the least in your family. But I'm telling you, that is all irrelevant because of what God says next. I don't care what you think about yourself. I don't care what somebody else says about you. Listen to what I say. I will be with you. See, the promise of God. The promise of the living God is that no voice will have more power over you than his. The promise of the person of Jesus is that when you feel less than, when you feel unseen, when you feel unqualified, he says, don't worry, I may not give you the resources you need, but I promise I will give you the presence that you need. I will be with you. I think far too often we've missed it. And we want more money, more fame, more success, more influence, more friends, more dreams, more stuff. And we don't realize that that's a flicker. It's a mist. And God's like, trust me, there's so many things that are coming your way. There's so much that I long to do in and through you. There's more joy and more beauty and more life than you are going to know what to do with. But I want you to find the reality in this truth. There is nothing more valuable than my presence. Because it's his presence that will give you the strength you need to overcome the challenges that are waiting for you. It's his presence that's going to add the texture to your life, that you're going to see the wonder of all he's doing in your life more than you could ever have dreamed. And it's when you find the beauty in his presence that it changes your future. See, Gideon was filled with fear. Gideon was filled with despair. He was filled with anxiety. And he was like so many of us, where we find ourselves paralyzed by all the external voices, which is exactly why he sent this angel to remind him, if you'll invite me in, my presence will be with you everywhere that you go. When we went to Disneyland and we had this incredible experience with the kids and a marker that we're going to have for the rest of our lives. See, the reason we were able to experience that is because of this incredible dude right here named Isaac. And Isaac works for Disney, and he and his wife, Mackenzie, I probably shouldn't put this out there, but I'm going to put this out there. They just generously said, hey, we can get you guys into Disneyland for free, and we've got tickets. And we have so many kids in our family. We couldn't get everybody for free, but we got a good number of us. And he said, I love this place, and I love bringing people into it. And we only got to go because of the generosity of Isaac. And when we're there, you could see Isaac talking to different people, and he's the veteran. He's my resource. And even when I didn't know where to go and people could look and maybe tell that this guy is a fraud, I was with Isaac. And Isaac gave me access to things that I never would have been able to on my own. And the same is true when it comes to Jesus, that when you invite him in, he will give you access into a life that you cannot experience on your own. And you have to have the courage and the wisdom and the tenacity to step out of the caves of your past, to step out of the caves of your fears. And when you do what God has called you to do, you find him waiting for you in your future. You find him waiting for you on the other side of your fears. You find that the life that you've dreamed of is simply one choice away. If we all could bow our heads and close our eyes. I know that there's some of you here right now that you have been trying to make sense of life absent of Jesus. That you have been trying to discover a life, and you feel like everywhere you turn, everything you try, you haven't been able to connect to something that lasts. And you've been playing it safe with your heart. I could feel the weight of so many of you in this room. You've been holding on to a life that's killing you from the inside out, and you're afraid to trust Jesus with your life. But what he's doing in this moment is he's saying, just trust me. Let go of the life without me and be overwhelmed with the life in me. And if you're here in this moment and you're ready to trust Jesus with everything, you're ready to give him all your doubts and your fears, all your anxiety and your worry, all of your pain, all your trauma. You're ready to give him your past. You're ready to give him all the voices that are telling you that this is a facade. All the voices telling you that you don't matter. You're ready to give it all to him and say, Jesus, I'm all yours. Jesus, I'm ready for the life that you have for me. If that's you, and here in this moment, you're finally ready to trust him with your life, then I want you to pray this simple prayer with me. Say, Jesus, I give you my life. Tell him right now, Jesus, I give you my life. And it's when you utter those words with God, you begin a conversation with him that's going to last a lifetime. Jesus, I give you my life. When you give him your life, you receive his forgiveness. You receive his mercy. You receive his kindness, his hope. Or you receive his peace. Jesus, I give you my life. If you're done living a life absent of the one who created all life, then just let this be your moment. Jesus, I give you my life. If you prayed that prayer right now, I want you as quickly as you can to raise your hand. so that I can pray over you, so that I can ask God to move in your life. Beautiful. Keep your hand up. Beautiful. I see you. I see you. I see you. Beautiful. And why it's important that you know that I see you is because God sees you. He sees you when you're at your worst. He sees you when you were at your best. He sees you in all the moments you blew it. He sees you in all the moments you thrived. Beautiful. He sees you. And he's ready to meet you in your future. Father, I pray for everybody who made a choice to follow you right now. I pray that you would wrap them in your love, Jesus. I pray that there will be no question of how much they matter to you, and I pray that they would just swim in the power of your grace. Jesus, I pray when they walk out of this room, they would be consumed by your light. And when the people around them wonder what in the world has happened to them, it could be a signpost that points directly to the power of your love. We thank you, Jesus, that we are never too far gone. We love you, and we ask all this in your name. Amen and amen. Hey, Mosaic, right now, can we just celebrate every single person who stepped into new life? Come on, we can do better than that. It's new life. It's transformation. It's hope. Beautiful. One last thing before we go, and somebody's going to come up, and Pastor Carlos is going to give us some closing things. If you're here, I'm not going to do another invitation or anything, but here's what I want. If you're here and you know that you have been hiding in a cave for far too long, if you know that there's a future that's waiting for you, and that's a future that you've been avoiding, or you've just let the fear overwhelm you, but you're done with living in the past, you're done with living a life that's less than. If that's you and you're just ready to move from coward to the courageous, then I'm just putting out a call this week. I want you to email me, joe@mosaic.org. Please don't email me anything else if it's not this, right? Don't email me about your grandfather who, this and that, right? Whatever. Email me that you are ready to step into the life that God's called you to, because I'm ready for us to build up an army that people move from the coward to the courageous, of people who move out of the caves and into life's greatest adventure. And if you're willing to go into the future, not absent of fear, but absent of self, then email me, let me know, because we're going to start a new movement where we no longer let the past be the story of pain and the story of absence of God. We're going to let the future be created on the backs of women and men who decided that God wasn't in their past, but he was waiting for them in their future. It's time to get out of the caves, y'all.